especially when you look at how when they would move somewhere, it was always as a family, no one left behind. That idea of them all being interrelated or living in the same house, it does feel very much like mob.
Yeah.
And there's something so familiar to it as a First Nations audience. But just on that point of what that collaboration with a family is like, were there things in the archive that you found that they hadn't seen, and what was it like repatriating that back?
Yeah, I mean, and we're still doing a lot of that, right? Like, I have a database that I started, I don't know, probably about 20 years ago, and it has 4,800 and something newspaper articles, because I was trying to track, because, you know, on top of it, they were shape-shifting, so there were lies in the papers, right? So you had to sort of kind of like go, who is the truth teller in that family? You know, who is the orator of that next generation? And once we figured that out, then it was like, okay, let's follow his line, or let's follow her line, and work out, like, because they were pretending to be Spanish or Hawaiian or Arab or whatever, you know, like, so they were, because they were taking on these different personas all around the world. You know, at one point, Julia the mum comes from Spain, and she's a flamenco dancer, and, you know, like, they just got fantastical sort of personas around them, and in a way, especially Con, he was like the Tom Cruise of the day, and very Forrest Gumpy, like, this family were in world events on international scale that you just go, really? Like, and then you go, are they just telling a fish story, you know, as a family? And then you realise that they're not, because then you see the footage. You can find the footage of them being in these places, and it's quite remarkable. And I think that's what's really lovely, is being able to give the family back some of those stories that they didn't even know about for their, I mean, because they didn't know that they were Indigenous until recently themselves. So for them, it was about, they'd all been brought up, the next generations, past the brothers and sisters of the Cleanos. And there's 5 generations now that have been totally living in America and London, thinking that they're Spanish.
You give all of that back as part of the collaboration with the family in the process of the filmmaking. What are you hoping audiences will take away from it? Because you give us a lot of ideas and human story in the film as well.
In 400 metres, turn left onto Grevillea Avenue.
Since the Novo, what I've found is that there's been a shy away from hearing our story. So we wanted to give them the right to hear and feel our stories again. And I hope that the film does a bit of that. I also hope that we, as Indigenous mob, especially in New South Wales,
turn left onto Grevillea Avenue.
With each other about the complexities of our identities, and we still in this country have not come up with.
In 400 metres, continue onto the Escort Way.
Many layers that we have to deal with in Aboriginal Australia to move forward. We have to always remember that country.
Both a screening with the Adelaide Film Festival highlights and responses from those screenings.
Continue on the Escort Way for 41 kilometres.
I mean, the family screening, in a way, was the one I was the most nervous to show, because they haven't seen it. And when they're trusting you with your, you know, I always think about that thing of you're holding their lives in your hands, and then you have to let it go, and you have to hope that they like what you've done. And so I was really happy, in a way, that they were happy with that. You know, You know, you hope they go on the ride with you, but the fact that there was probably not a dry eye at the end, emotion from the community and the joy of understanding to anything, you know, was quite spectacular. It was lovely to have some moments of people, you know, really going up to Molly and Deb and thanking them for sharing so much of the story and starting how if you find out today, then come to community and how do we as a community accept and how do we do all that stuff. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but you know, there are journeys that all of us have to take now to make our community stronger. And that's what hopefully.
I mean, I know you are a generous person in so many ways, but it seemed to me like a real act of generosity. You're somebody whose parents are so well known. Your mother's an icon in the community. She's done the hard yards. Everyone knows you as Joyce's daughter and now know you because of your own work. So if you think about identity, you do come from a place of privilege because you've been so ensconced in the community. And it felt to me like a real act of generosity to open the door to people who are just finding out, who don't have that privilege, if you like, of being so grounded in the community, being able to point to where they're from and having a long connection. And I reflected when I was watching the film that felt like a very generous conversation to be starting, and that it felt like there's more authenticity about the conversation because it started by somebody who is so well known and grounded in the First Nations community.
Thanks, Larissa. I mean, that's what I hope we do. I think we have to start, you know, too much of infighting in our communities, and it's now time for us to understand those layers of what's happening out there. And as buffalo, we're very empathetic, but at the same time, you know, ways of thinking have become isolated and not communal. And so if we move back to that, then I'm hoping that we start to have better conversations and start healing some of that stuff, because at the end of the day, we're the ones that can close that gap.
You've been a fantastic mentor to generation of First Nations filmmakers. I include myself. You did mentor me in my first feature film. You've been a big mentor to me through that. It's another part of your generosity. I just wonder, as a final question, what's your reflection on what you see with the new wave of First Nations filmmakers coming through, pretty much through the pathway that you really helped pave?
was a prisoner of war in Changi, so removed in another area. But I suppose in retrospect, when you think about growing up, I mean, it was never part of our education. We didn't understand why there was a mission down the road, and we didn't really appreciate what happened to younger people. I went to the same school. We weren't to know. We weren't empowered to understand our history. We weren't empowered to understand the dreadful impacts of colonisation, the massacres, the rapes, the murders, and
the stolen generation was a longer time ago, but it really wasn't. What's your reaction when people say those kinds of things?
Look, it's many generations. I mean, there's more removal now, currently, than there was over that period, and that's a real concern because, to me, that's the impact of removal. And is the impact it had on their children and grandchildren has been really hurtful, and a lot of trauma that is, I guess, inherited through DNA system, the epigenetics of impacts on future generations. So the impact currently, I mean, we had the misfortune, if you like, of showing our documentary at Banksia Hill, which is notorious. I mean, there was a riot this week, kids on the roof, etc. And the impact of the documentary on these children was really, I could say insightful, but really encouraging that these young men just sat there like, you know, sponges, just not appreciating their history and not knowing their history. Oh, Janae, and one young man said to me, he said, "Uncle, I've been locked up twice now for smashing my nana's house. Uncle, I'll never do it again." Tears on his little face. "I'll never do it again because now I know what my nana went through." So when you think of the impact, it's ongoing, and you know, I think sometimes academics have got no common sense, but sometimes when they say that, you know, this colonisation's been around for 7 or 8 generations, it's going to take that long to heal. So it is that truth-telling, and it really needs to be told. You know, truth-telling is healing.
Jim, in the documentary, at the centre of it is the experiences of First Nations survivors. Why was that so important to you and everyone else to be able to speak their truth?
The filming, the capturing of testimonies coincided with a book launch, and the book launch, I guess, giants. We stand on Bessie Flowers, was removed in 1860. 3 sisters, or many people, our country, to Melbourne on a boat. So the book launch was instrumental, or impetus for us to have a gathering of mission folk from Noangra and Maribyrnong, where Todgie was, for them to really just to talk about their experiences and things that have occurred to them, or what hasn't happened since the Bringing Them Home report. So the filming of the book launch was one thing, but to have the same producer film testimonies of people that have never fronted a camera before was really quite powerful. And then for them to be part of the rollout, not all of them, most of them have been part of a rollout where they will sit after a screening and be on a panel where they'll respond to questions. So it's the value they get from telling their story, and each time they open their mouth, they feel stronger and valued. In fact, one of the participants was a little mouse when we met him 2015. Hard to get a word out of him. Now, one of them, I'm just so proud of him, just can't shut him up. And that's the strength of healing. That's the strength of telling the story. That's the strength of being valued. And it's not just about money. It's about being valued as a human being. And the question is, the more people are healed through collective healing and telling their story with mob and being supported by mob, because they've all had similar stories. And I got to say, a lot of the traditional owners and people that weren't removed don't know the history either. So there's a lot of learnings within the full mob community, because there is a lot of pushback, I think, from TOs or mob that are really hell-bent on native title, which flies in the face of our own cultural upbringing and belonging. So the more our people are able to sit in front of their mob and sit together with their mob, the better they're going to be. And that's really the reality. They were in a safe place for the filming.
And Tony, did you feel like this was healing, being able to talk about this with other survivors?
Yeah, no, I think as Uncle Jim mentioned, is when we get together, it's really, we're like family, and we classify ourselves as brothers and sisters, and we've always identified that right across the country of children that have been removed. We're part of a profound group of people, and it's a great opportunity where we do come together and, through that collective healing of sitting together, talking and sharing, it's our healing. It's even if those that are not talking, they're just listening and processing what's being discussed and shared by other survivors. Again, that's that form of healing for those individuals, and we encourage that all the time. And it's been really wonderful in the sense that, the more we getting stronger and stronger, and are becoming a lot more brave to share more about their pain and suffering of growing up in these institutions.
And Jim here too, just to add to that, there are also mob in the community that come along to our healing gatherings. We've got to do it on a regular basis, where people come and talk, and even if it's just socialising over lunch, they're still talking when it's time to go home. They don't want to go home. So the reality is we probably yarn around gravesites more than we do in safe places. And that's healing. Sometimes on a Friday there's 3 or 4 friends that are all just connected to. So the different loss issues are also shared in these gatherings.
Yeah, all valid things you're saying there. Alan, I just kind of want to get your take on, they mentioned a lot of opportunities to implement this sort of film for younger generations in schools. What is your take on showing this sort of film to historians like yourself?
One of the challenges we've had with this documentary is that it's M-rated. It has been approved for use in the curriculum in WA by the Education Department, but only for a specific subject which relates to agriculture, with people in the curriculum space to develop a range of materials. We're also working with the Healing Foundation, who have some top quality educational materials. Certainly we are determined to get stolen generation history up front in education, starting from primary school and going all the way through. It's such an important aspect of our history that needs to be told. And Jim referred earlier to a quote that I might use, which is appropriate. Historian a few years ago, she makes the comment that historians have been part of the architecture of colonisation. They've decided what stories are told and by who. What we've done here, because it needs to be done, is stolen generation people have decided what stories, which is a first. Places, people in government departments, in from them consistently is that they did not know this stuff. Or if they did know this stuff, they had been taught a version by people in power that distorted the truth and created the impression that Aboriginal children, were taken for their own good. So that's another part of our challenge, is some but they don't. And they don't know that the plan was to breed them out. So what we've done, and when people see the documentary, there are powerful voices from survivors, but Kelvin Pell, who is the narrator and does a wonderful job and has won awards for it, he reads quotes from white non-Aboriginal parliamentarians and policymakers. One of the most powerful, and I've briefly quoted here, Garnet Barrington Wood, a member of the WA Legislative Council, said in 1936, "I know that the long-distance view is to breed these people right out, but so long as the heart casts can make with full blacks, the process is being reversed, the girls constituting the greatest problem of the lot. I would not be above taking them away from their mothers at the earliest possible stage. We owe it to the future generations of white people that something
arrest them and they're not knowing they have a police record because they don't know. When children were taken under the Child Welfare Act in Western Australia, they were charged. So consequently they were given a police record or a criminal record, and they didn't know. So growing up, they've got this record. Our research suggests that there are seniors stolen people around the country who are arrested by the police because the police know. So the incriminating stuff that the documentary reveals, I guess, is a lesson for our own mob, and perhaps why we're still churches and government. So we're just so proud of what we've achieved. It's taken its toll, I guess, on some of the folk involved, but the truth has to be told. But we stand for truth, justice and healing, and I suppose for us we've achieved something in truth and justice because our Premier saw the documentary and then announced a redress.
What do you hope that the next generation of young mob can get from a film like this?
I mean, look, I see lots of wonderful young people now. I mean, people that are GPs, lawyers, I would never have thought have gotten through the barriers or the trauma, and they're showing now that how resilient we can be. I mean, one of our stolen people who was in mission and had language and culture taken from her is now a leading light in interpretive services. She knows 5 languages. So the resilience of our people, whether they're in the system now, but more important, it's going to make on future generations, because this is what the documentary is all about. It wasn't just about acquiring some sort of compensation. Let's face it, they're throwing us a bone yet again. Our compensation to non-Aboriginal people and their compensations, and there's many, many examples of non-Aboriginal people getting millions out of poverty that we have in our communities. $85,000 is not a lot of money in white man's language, but to assist our people get through some of the hurdles they have, again, $85,000 is not going to go very far. Compensation is not going to close that gap. It's got to be ongoing truth-telling.
I think for me, it's our young mob, but it's also the wider community and the country itself. I provide a quote to you: I have deep hope for Australia that there can be reconciliation. I want every Australian to make an Australia in which every person reflection on our shared history and the harmful periods and events that continue to haunt us as a nation, and understanding the Aborigines Act is fundamental to understanding why those harmful periods and events took place. So for me, I think that's the key for all of us, really. It's about us really having a deep look at ourselves and a reflection, and to do something different and challenge those that we work with, family. And I guess, it's a message like the late Rob Riley said, don't let the bringing them home report be swept under the carpet. Again, it's a message that we must continue to keep the fire burning around those sort of issues.
And Jim, it's important for non-Aboriginal people to appreciate this is not about blame or guilt, because they don't know. They didn't know. So don't feel you're being blamed. Just appreciate this was part of your education. It's our joint history. So it's not about blame. It's about really making people understand, and that's what makes our mob
And as always, you can find us on the ABC Listen app or on social media via ABC Indigenous, along with our Titter show Away, hosted by the wonderful Ruby Brimmer. I'm Larissa Barrett, and this is Speaking Out.
Compelling encounters.
What's been your most confronting experience?
What would your dying wish be?
You've done your homework, haven't you?
And Lee Sales is returning as our mentor.
Compelling ideas.
There's always been disruptors.
Compelling vision.
The actual sky had flame in it.
Compelling stories.
You can change sport, you can change.
Assembly. Annabelle Crabb's Civic Duty. I Was Actually There. And Endgame with Tony Armstrong. All these and more, where it's always free, always compelling. ABC iView.
Essie McCullough with you on ABC Radio National. Now, you this weekend's Future Tense with Angela Fennell. Billions of dollars have been allocated to Mudgee. Elliot Brown from the Wall Street Journal has been tracking its progress.
The idea behind when looking up overall, around 2016, and the idea was essentially to do a Dubai on steroids. I mean, it was supposed to be the future of everything. The key feature is the line, which is this 160-kilometer long building that runs 500 meters tall. The idea is essentially to have a 9 million person city in a single pair of buildings that run parallel to the desert. So there'd be no cars, you'd get around on people movers and trains, electric helicopters, everything would be hyper digital, all the industries there would be for new industrial design, but a lot of it was sort of planned back by consultants in the late 80s with just technical techniques.
Elliot Brown from Wall Street Journal. How's it working out? Into Future Tense with Angela Fennell. This comes in at 12:30 on ABC Radio National or on the Listen app.
It is a truth universally acknowledged.
A celebration. I'm Claire. Karen Joy Fowler and more will explore why in 2025 the Austen effect is bigger than ever. It's quite incredible. Dear Jane, on the book show Mondays at 10 on ABC Radio National or anytime on the ABC Listen app.
I hope your afternoon's going well on Friday, so that means there's something to look forward to. I hope it's good for you. Now ahead, Sarah Konoski's guest on Conversations today is the Tasmanian writer Heather Rose. When Heather was 12, her older brother and grandfather died in a boating accident, and Heather spent many years making peace with her grief. And on the way, she's encountered ghosts, visions, and the value of being grateful. Sarah Konoski's guest on Conversations after the 3 o'clock news, right here on ABC Radio National.
Yesterday's announcement, he'll quit the Nationals. The former Deputy Prime Minister had been mulling his political future after leaving the Nationals party and confirming he wouldn't recontest his seat at New England at the next election. Mr Joyce is yet to confirm if he'll join One Nation, but Mr McCormack says it's all but locked in.
He's given every inclination that that's where he's going. But look, he probably should have made it yesterday and ended the charade with the circus.
The federal government has defended its My Aged Care website after the watchdog found it was making it difficult for older people to access information they need. A spokesperson for Aged Care Minister Sam Ray says the government's overhauled the website earlier this year and has spent more than $20 million making the site easier to navigate. But the Inspector General of Aged Care still thinks more change is needed to improve accessibility. A man's died after being shot several times in a shooting in Sydney's west. The shooting happened at Blacktown just before midday. 2 people have been arrested following a short pursuit. Police say there's no threat to the public. However, the community is being urged to avoid the area. The death of a National Guard member has been confirmed by US President Donald Trump while addressing troops on Thanksgiving Day. America's
today, Thanksgiving here in America. Yesterday, when a man came and it looked like it was a targeted attack, he certainly targeted them rather than civilians in the street, came up within close proximity, shot them, and
the death toll from an apartment complex fire in Hong Kong rises as the search for survivors continues. At least 94 people are now known to have died in the blaze, but more than 200 remain unaccounted for. Authorities earlier said they'd made contact with at least 25 people who are still trapped inside the buildings. Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee says a fund worth around $60 million has been established to support those impacted.
Regarding emergency residents, we have so far opened 9 shelters, currently accommodating over 500 residents. We are also coordinating public and private sectors to mobilise all available resources to support residents' emergency housing needs.
A warning, this story contains the name of an Indigenous the father of an Indigenous teenager who was by a New South Wales police officer hopes the officer help him move. Benedict Bryant previously in the Sydney crash, 16-year-old John Kalani Wright died in hospital after suffering serious head injuries when a stolen motorbike he was riding collided with an unmarked police car. Wright will be sentenced next year. Lachlan Wright says his family's been fighting for justice for years.
Obviously, it's a very good outcome for us. This has been going on for years now. We knew from the day that Jai had the accident that this should be the outcome that we got.
New South Wales Health has issued a warning about high-dose MDMA tablets and ketamine-like substances circulating in New South Wales. Andrew Maplesdorf reports.
Higher than normal doses of MDMA were detected at a drug checking station during last weekend in southern New South Wales. Ketamine analogues were also detected. These copy ketamine's chemical makeup, but can produce different effects, including stronger dissociation or hallucinations. No festival attendees experienced an overdose requiring hospitalisation. New South Wales Health Chief Addiction Medicine Specialist Dr. Hester Wilson says she's concerned the substances are still in circulation and warned the risks associated with taking illicit drugs are increased by warm weather.
And the lead Australian cyclist Ben O'Connor has been confirmed for next year's Tour Down Under in January. You're up to date with the very latest from ABC News.
ABC Radio National.
It's time now for Conversations, and Sarah's guest today is writer Heather Rose.
It all seems so wonderful, and then
Rub-a-dub-dub, you're all great now.
Now I'm in a prison cell. That's when
The butterfly that kissed your cheek.
things started to click.
Conversations with Sarah Konoski on ABC Radio.
Heather Rose points out that, according to modern physics, all that we see and know of in our universe, that's everything from mosquitoes to distant planets, from the monuments of human history. In 600 metres, continue onto Main Street. 5%. Well, that's what scientists call dark energy and dark matter. And we don't really know what it is, but it's there, all around us and all through us, this vast mystery that our everyday daylight lives can't really grapple with. Heather has had an intuitive sense of this ever since she was a little girl, growing up in the ancient forests and wild beaches of Tasmania. But her
Continue for 12 kilometres.
things intensified when a terrible tragedy befell her family when Heather was 12 years old. She spent much of her life since then looking for a way to commune with what lies beyond. That quest has taken her from Buddhist monasteries to Native American dance rituals to the discipline of writing. Heather's novels include the Stellar Award-winning The Museum of Modern Love, inspired by the performance artist Marina Abramovich, and the best-selling thriller Bruni. I spoke to Heather after the release of her memoir, Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here. Hi, Heather.
Hello, Sarah.
Tell me about that in Tasmania. How did she spend her days?
We lived about an hour out of Hobart. We lived on a beach. I grew up with sunrises and birds wheeling across the sky and the ever-flowing artwork of clouds that filled the eye from east. And one of my enduring memories is sitting on the shore with a hammer and chisel from my grandfather's workshed, opening the oysters at low tide and just lifting them up and popping them in my mouth. It was a privileged childhood because it was so free.
What kind of presence was your mum when you were a little girl?
She was such a bright, bubbly presence. She was full